Hey, welcome to Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. In our relationships, we're faced with two options. We can grow together or we can grow apart. And today I'm hanging out with, we didn't ask him his last name. Sorry.
Muller,
Is it
Aaron
Mueller or Muller?
Muller, Aaron Muller.
Muller. Okay,
Yeah,
wait, say it again.
Muller.
Muller. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Here we go again. Hey, welcome to Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. In our relationships, we're faced with two options. We can grow together or we can grow apart. Today, I'm hanging out with Arron Muller, mental health therapist, and we're exploring ways you and your partner can intentionally grow together. This is Relatable, Relationships Unfiltered. Hello, Arron. It is so nice to officially, virtually, but meet you. We have been hanging out on Instagram for quite some time. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to meet you. So we are going to get into the topic of basically relational growth. A lot of couples, in my experience, they seem to believe that, you can just kind of go through the motions, and as long as nothing bad is happening, then that's good enough. But as you and I both know, there's a lot more that is required and that goes into a relationship actually thriving and growing together. What is your experience when it comes to that, like the growth of a couple?
Well, in my experience, I see the opposite when they don't grow together. What happens? I think it's important to be intentional about sharing what direction you want to go in as a couple, and separately. So individual goals. For my wife and I, we talk a lot about what we want to do individually, and we talk about what we want to do together as a couple and as a family. And I think if people are intentional about that and keep that open dialogue, there's no mystery, there's no kind of confusion about what direction I'm trying to grow in. And it may not be the same direction that my partner is trying to go, but at least there's an understanding. There's kind of like, okay, well, that's great. And, encouragement and checking in. How is that going for you and things of that nature? We all could benefit from that support.
For sure. And when I'm even thinking, so like backing it up, I'm even thinking about like the dating phase and clients that I'm working with who are single. And an activity I have a lot of my clients do is identifying their 5 needs, wants, and boundaries. And part of that is like, what is your goals for yourself? Like, what do you envision for your future? Where do you want to be in 5 years and 10 years? And I think that a lot of people don't have those conversations like in the dating phase. And so then they end up in a committed relationship. And kind of like you said, maybe the direction is not the same path, which is okay. But when you're kind of caught off guard by that, that can create a bit of an issue if that's not discussed prior.
Absolutely. And just hearing you say that, it makes me think about, what if you're not aware for yourself about what you want?
Mm.
How can you communicate that to someone else if you're not in tune, in alignment in terms of the vision of where you want to go? So I feel
Yeah.
like there's a sense of self, in a sense of just like knowing where you want to go so that you can communicate that to someone else. So I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing is, where am I in this process? Where am I in my life in terms of
Mhm.
where I am now and where I want to go? So I feel
For
like
sure.
to be a well partner, you have to be kind of well yourself. And I do that a lot in terms of working with my couples. So it definitely encouraging individual counseling as well as couples counseling.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point is that, and I am frequently saying that, like, if let's say we're working with a couple and there's ongoing issues and one of them is getting individual help, but the other isn't, it's really hard to repair, as you are suggesting, if like we don't have our own self-awareness, understanding of where we've been, where we want to go, where we're at right now. How do you suggest that, whether if you're working with like an individual client or if you're working with a couple and you're like, hey guys, like get clear on who you are, what are some ways that you suggest somebody goes about even starting that process of not only their self-awareness of like currently, but then also like projecting into the future?
Well, I definitely kind of, encourage, whether it be, not everybody wants to do therapy, but some type of wellness, whether it be kind of journaling or some type of mindfulness to kind of become more centered and grounded in terms of where they are now, because they may not
Right.
be in a state of wellness. So I definitely kind of meet them where they are and kind of find out, are you considering therapy right now, or where you are, where would you like to be in the future also? So kind of
Yeah.
exploring those options first, because just saying you need to go to therapy may not be, received well right
Yeah.
away. But they slowly recognize, this is maybe something that could be beneficial to me, but I encourage a wellness, and that could be a variety of things. And pretty much, if the couples come into the counseling together, there's a pretty much an understanding, considering we've been through a couple sessions, that they want the relationship to work. So
Yeah.
kind of exploring, what would it take for the relationship to work? What
Right.
next steps would he need to take for that to work? And it may be, what, maybe I do need to consider um, individual therapy or some type of wellness um, protocol.
I sit with so many couples. I completely agree, but I sit with so many couples who like are so resistant to going to do their individual work. So whether, we are such a culture of busy, that is our go-to
Mhm.
statement for everything. So whether it's because they don't have time or because of the resources or whatever the case, but I find that really unfortunate, because I'm a huge believer that in order for us to really heal our relationship, we have to start by healing ourselves. And so when that is not taking place, when we don't have really true awareness of our relationship programming, why we're showing up in the ways that we're showing up, and what to do about it. Um, because we also see, like triggers. So triggers are such a common thing in relationships. And until you do your own healing, the odds of you as a couple just like learning a few communication skills and now all of a sudden you're not going to get triggered anymore, not so likely.
Absolutely, and understanding where the root is.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about, we see kind of the symptom, but where is the virus, right? And
Right.
I tell them that therapy is the antibiotic, right? But we
Mm,
need to address it and explore it, right? Where the virus is, and that's where the therapy comes in. Why am I responding this way? Why do I yell? Why do I scream when you do this? Really unpacking that, and the individual sessions could really help that person target one on one with no one else in the room, really focus on that. And that may be generational, it may be something that happened in their past. And with that deeper understanding, they can show up better for themselves and for their partner.
right. Completely agree. When you're doing individual work, where do you start kind of that understanding what the root is? And, what does that exploration look like for your client to even discover that?
And it's a in depth and an intense process, because
Yeah.
whether in they may be dealing with stuff currently, but we have to go back. And I'm big on going back to childhood, and I like,
Yeah.
that's where I start. I work a lot with children also, so I look at children behaviors, and then I see adults, and then I see how, it just continues on, right? So I
Right.
look at, and allow them to explore. Tell me about your earliest experience, or tell me when you recall that, or tell me how you grew up. My favorite question is, tell me how you were in school,
Mm,
because that's, I'm also work in schools, so I see a lot of children's behaviors, and your parents are not there. This is around your peers. How do you show up in those spaces? Because oftentimes that's where a lot of things happen to children, whether it be teasing, whether it be you are a star. It's just so many things happen in the school, and of course at home as well. But I
sure.
definitely like to explore childhood.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that is so I started my career as a child and adolescent therapist, and that's what I did for many, many years. And I transitioned into doing adult relationship work because of that, because
Right.
as I sat with child after child, but then we bring parents into that, and we start
Yes.
talking with parents, and we try to understand where their parenting style is coming from. And I began to realize that like the power of helping parents really recognize their own childhood, and how the way that they're parenting comes from what was role modeled from them, comes from, even a lot of parents don't realize like your child can also trigger you, and not just trigger you in the sense of like make you angry, like yes, absolutely, but they might kind of like rub up against some of your unprocessed trauma and your unhealed wounds, or the way that they're acting might remind you of something from your childhood. And when parents don't have that awareness, they can't respond in the most effective way for their child because they're just responding out of like what they know in the
Yeah,
moment versus where it's coming from.
absolutely. Right. And they may see maybe the relationship didn't work out with the other partner, right? And they see the child have some of those similar traits,
Yes.
right? And that can also respond negatively. And the children receive that energy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when we're looking at growing together, so we're talking about like identifying, goals together. How do you like to have couples do that? Do you have homework that you provide for them as they are starting to like identify what direction they want to go, and are they unified in that? Or do you have activities you do with them, or what's your approach to that?
I keep it kind of very free flowing in terms of exploring where they want to get to. Whether it be, do we want to grow? Do we want to learn how to communicate more? So I find different strategies to help them with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like the like regular check-ins is something I talk
yeah,
about frequently. And so, identifying, sometimes even doing like a where they're going to sit down and have like a business meeting together, and they're going to talk
yeah.
about, what are our personal 5-year goals? What are our 5-year goals as a family? Um but then to really have that documented somewhere, whether it's they do a vision board, or do you do
Right.
anything like that?
Um, I think I have them create a list. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
recall doing that. Kind of have them create a list of what are some of the ways you want to grow together, right? And then
Sure.
explore, and then write down the barriers. I think there's power in writing things out. Uh, Oftentimes we keep things in our head, and
Mhm.
just letting out on paper could be
Yeah.
very therapeutic and makes it real. Off,
Right.
also it's like, wow, I didn't know I felt this way. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know you wanted that. So I encourage a lot of writing. Some of our couples really don't really like the writing piece, but I often say kind of push through the discomfort and work through that. But
Yeah.
definitely writing out the goals is super super important.
Yeah, how do you see the, like, gender differences come up when you're doing couples work, or even individual, and, you're maybe working on relationship stuff? When it comes to, like, maybe making a plan to grow together or starting to implement that, do you, I assume, see a difference in how each gender kinda responds to that and also shows up to that?
No, ironically, usually both participants are really excited and part of the process. I haven't seen a difference in that, fortunately.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
do you see a difference just in like maybe personality wise? Like somebody maybe might is more invested or more interested, or you feel like most of your couples are equally invested?
But I will tell you this: the couples where there is kind of, I would call it more trouble in paradise, as I call it, and there kind of more issues going on, they may be a little bit collaboratively less willing to want to do it or excited about doing it because there's just so many issues and they don't
Yeah,
see this. Oh, what are we writing this out for? They don't really see it as helpful. But
sure.
couples where there is kind of like, we are at a place now where we work through our stuff and it's like, okay, what's the next step? They're more excited about that
Sure.
process.
Yeah, and I would say probably a lot of times the couples who are having that trouble in paradise, we maybe aren't starting with like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because that might include divorce court. So like we
R-
maybe are not
right,
asking those questions.
right. But you know what? I also kind of think about, well, we're in this space right now, but where do you want to see yourself? So I kind of use it in that,
Sure.
kind of frame it that way, in terms of
Yeah.
like, we're here now, but where do you see yourself? And if one partner is not mentioning the other person, that says a lot, right?
Yeah.
If it's more about me and my growth and I want to be happy and all of that stuff. So that's usually an indicator to me where they are mentally.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the accountability piece of this, because this is where I also see sometimes it can get complex. Like sometimes doing things like this, especially with couples who maybe have a hard time communicating or they do trigger each other frequently. Um, then when they have follow-up meetings about it, maybe it feels more like criticism versus feedback, or the accountability piece is really hard to do in that. How do you suggest for couples to provide each other with accountability that is not criticism or does not come across as criticism?
We'll definitely talk about tone.
Mhm.
What comes up a lot is uh the only reason why you're doing it is because the session is coming up tomorrow. You wasn't thinking about it before, so it becomes kind of that Tom and Jerry kind of
Yeah.
back and forth. But once they work through that, it's kind of keeping it as teamwork. We're doing this together, right? We're going through this process together. If we can kind of build that, build that camaraderie, build that friendship, kind of resume that friendship again, and
Mhm.
kind of like this, we're doing this together.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful, so that there is no, oh, why are you talking to me like this? Why are you treating me like a baby? I know what I have to do. Yeah,
Right. Which I think, I mean, it does come up, that criticism,
yeah,
whether it's because of attachment styles or gender, or, I mean, I do see that, not to like stereotype, but I do see that often men feel like they are being maybe criticized by, if we're talking about hetero, normative couples,
mhm,
that maybe the male often feels like he is being criticized. And then I can speak for not the whole female population, but women often tend to maybe have more of they might come across as controlling. And so when I'm
right,
thinking in these type of activities, I guess I'm thinking,
yeah,
so like she really wants to make sure it's done and it's done right. And it's like, we need to put time and effort into this. Where maybe he or whatever the other attachment style or personality type in it is just maybe not investing as much, and
right.
like, where do you usually kind of take that? So, they come in and tend to kind of tell on each other. And
Yes.
what do you do with that?
And you know what? I think that's such rich data because that lets me know what goes on in the house. That tells me what
Right,
goes on during situations where it becomes mama bear. And how's that working for you?
right.
I'm sure she might not want to be Papa Bear. He doesn't want to be treated like a child. So really exploring, okay, with this assignment, right? This is what we were supposed to do. We each had a role. Be honest. Which part did you fall short, as opposed to not getting it done? Right? Fall short. Just in framing it differently. Where did you fall short? What occurred, like to not let this assignment happen or to not
Mm,
achieve it? What could you
yeah,
have done differently? And I say collaboratively, what could you have done differently? What could, and kind of model how to problem solve. Right? I think that's
right.
what we're doing now. Even if it doesn't work, I think it's great when it doesn't work
Yeah.
because now
Because
we're really seeing the dynamics and we can
yeah.
point it out and say, well, I'm sure if it happens with this assignment, it also happens with taking out the garbage and doing the laundry. Then we can really start to unpack some of those communication challenges.
What are some of your favorite like go-to communication skills? Like, especially in those type of situations where the message is clearly being lost each time. What do you kind of do foundationally?
I love role play. I really
Mm,
love role play, and I really and interestingly enough, I also do paradoxal intervention. So I'm like, continue arguing, keep it going,
yeah.
and they're like, no, keep it going. Like I want you to be intentional about it because you do it so well. So this time, do it,
Yeah.
and they're like, wait, but no, continue to arguing, and I want you to be intentional about it. Why? And how do you feel doing it? Did you feel good?
Mm,
Really start to have them be aware and intentional about what they're doing, and is
yeah.
it working for you? Because our automatic response may be to yell and scream, but the therapist told you to ensure to do it more, and record it if you need to, right?
Do you have them record it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so funny.
I want to hear it, and then
Yeah.
and they say, I can't believe this sounds so silly.
When they listen to it
When
back.
when we play during the session, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I have so many clients that come in and they'll say, "Next time I'm just going to record it so that you can see," and
Right.
that's so funny to me, but like there is value in that. I mean, and I have historically talked to them about even recording themselves and like
Yes.
how what is their facial expression looking like? What's their tone sounding like? Because I think a lot of people lack a lot of awareness around
A
that. So
lot of
going back to the
awareness.
self-awareness. Yeah.
We don't, and my favorite line, another one of my favorite lines, I said, we don't have a mirror in front of our faces. So we don't see our facial expressions, we don't hear our tones. So it really allows you to look at yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. That makes me laugh. Somebody I was dating recently, there was like I was talking to him and we were recording something and it was like a pause in what we were doing. But so like I was facing him as I was talking to him and then we played it back and I was like, is that how I look at you? And he's like, all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You see?
Like you just don't even know.
You see?
Yeah. Oh, I saw. And
You're right.
he saw too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you like to do like use the role playing and or is there any like go to when it comes to, I statements or like do you have any skills that you're teaching them or it's mostly just this like a organic shift as you go?
So it's a organic shift, but also because every relationship is so different, I also allow them to point out their own dynamics in terms of their behaviors and how they engage with each other. If it's accusatory statements, helping them reframe and think of other ways to express
Yeah,
their needs and wants. If it's the use of I statements, um, and just it's just like relationships are so unique. I can't even think that there's one couple, like two couples that I do the same absolute interventions with, because
sure.
and dated from session to session, uh, things change, situations change, but the behaviors are the same. And I
Mhm.
point that out, that life brings so many different changes where we often respond with very, just few responses,
Mhm.
and sometimes they're not the most healthiest.
Yeah. Because a lot of times it's our adaptive child traits that we're responding with. So, we learned in childhood how to respond to something in order to keep ourselves as safe as we can. And so that's often, like you're saying, I mean, it's a pretty limited toolbox that a lot of us bring into our romantic relationships and a limited toolbox with often the wrong tools. And so
Absolutely.
we are in these situations where it would take maybe a tweak or just a shift and the whole thing could have gone differently, but we don't know what we don't know. And that's one of the biggest things that I see with couples is that a lot of it just even boils down to increasing like awareness about themselves, about their partners, why their
Hmm.
partner is responding that way, and then ways to respond different that a lot of times they say like, I wouldn't even have thought about it through that lens. And it's true because I mean, how can you? I often say to them, like, if they start to get kind of frustrated with themselves, and I'm like, that's like me just showing up and saying, start speaking French. You've never
Right.
even practiced it a day in your life. And like, you can't expect just to know it.
Just to know it. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is knowledge, right? A lot of it is insight. And, I think oftentimes we get so, uh, couples get so fast and furious and in love really, really quick. And it's just so much fun and so exciting,
Yeah.
that we get kind of the superficial, we get kind of just like the face, right? We get the kind of like outside to get to know
Sure.
the person. And then we get like the first layer, the inside. And then when it becomes a little bit more in depth and intense, we get the second and third layer. And it's like, whoa, who
Yeah.
are you? Right. But that's the
Yeah.
person we need to know. That's the person we need to know.
How long do you see that usually taking before people get that? I mean, obviously everyone is different, but do you have like a range of what you see at average?
I, th- I wish I had an average, but I feel like it varies so much.
Yeah,
And I feel like it's situational too. Like I feel like situations also bring out
sure. Yeah, like yeah, and things you can't predict. So if they're faced
things you
with
can't predict. So
sure.
adversity, tragedy, trauma, infidelity, uh, those things bring out, certain feelings and behaviors, and it's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this, But then it's like, but I'm still in love with you, so How do we work? How do we work through this? How do we deal with this?
Yeah.
And then it's like when you don't, and it rocks the foundation, right? It
Mhm.
shifts the dynamic.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we recreate a new relationship, right? How do we're in this house and remodeling it. The foundation is there, but we are doing renovations. How do you work through those renovations?
Sure. And sometimes I think it's even digging up the foundation. And I talk to a lot of my clients about that. Like, we need to lay, I just call it like laying bricks. Like, we
Yeah,
need to lay a whole new foundation because you're right. What they've been operating on, if they didn't like show up as their authentic self, and not because they were trying to be disingenuous, but because it's just what we do when we
what we do.
first,
Yeah,
and like you're saying, if we're not faced with adversity, like we show up different in different situations. But sometimes I do believe it is truly like completely digging up the foundation and starting over. And that a lot of that is the discussion around back to what I was saying about the wants, needs, and boundaries. Sometimes I'll sit with a couple and I will have them do that list more so that we can say, like, if you were to pick a partner today, you picked each other 5, 10, 15 years ago. If you were to pick each other today, is this who you would be choosing? And like, is there alignment in how you want to move forward? And then if there is, then we can redo the foundation. And if there's not, that can
right.
sometimes be a bit of a moot point.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that, figuring out, like you're saying, like remodeling and how can we show up differently? I think one of the biggest things that really rocks each other's boat is the first time they see each other triggered. So the
Yes,
first time they see each other react to something in a with big emotions.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
What
is
do you usually see with that?
and how and is how do I respond? What am I internalizing, right? And
Right.
who this reminds me of, right? Is this a parent that I saw this same behavior? And how do I deal with that? Uh, and if one person kind of takes a step back, right, then that may become the dynamic. Person Hulk, as we call it, and then the other person retreats back.
Mhm.
And what does that do to the relationship?
Yeah. And then kind of what are some things you even do with them to try to change that dance? Like, what is the work that you do with them to even increase the awareness about the other? Knowing that often it's that inner child trigger.
Yeah,
So like when we can start to look at it as they're feeling afraid, they're feeling triggered, we can show up differently with that. Do you explore it from like that angle as well?
I explore from that angle, and there may be that opportunity where for the couple, is like, okay, I'm going to meet with one person this week and get more information about that, and how you're feeling about whether it be stepping back or the Hulk experience, and what do you think when you respond like that? What does that do to your partner, and what does it do to you? So really,
Sure.
and then having that intimate time to really explore that, and then come back together and kind of discuss what went on during that process. And I think that kind of creates kind of another set of goals and objectives. At that point, is what do we do? How do we change, or how do we shift when we are met with challenge, right?
Yeah.
How can you support each other, right? And if I need to take a step away for a moment, that there's a
Sure.
general understanding that when there's a challenge and my partner is feeling, and also I want to add that in there. I also want them to recognize their anger cues. Why do you know when you're getting angry? As
Mm,
children, with children, working with children, I talk about feeling hot, right? How do you know when you're getting angry? Because we kind of teach them to manage their response, right? Because they get in trouble when they like throw a chair in a classroom. But there are cues to let you know that I'm getting angry. Do I feel hot? Do I feel my heart beating fast? Do I feel shaky? Right? There are cues that let us body know
right.
before we go, to 1,000. Right. So
Sure.
even for adults, we need to kind of check in and say, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. I'm feeling hot. I'm feeling attacked. So can I say, you know what? I think we're getting is it a little hot and easy right now. We both need to be in alignment. that when someone says that it's getting a little hot right now, can I take a step for a moment and come back and revisit? That there is absolute trust that we're going to revisit this conversation. Because often a lot of people will say, no, they say they're going to come, that we're going to table it and come back, and it never is resolved again. So we have to have that promise also, that it's not just to say, I would like to stop and calm down. You must come back and have that conversation, and that's what builds trust also. The other
Yeah,
person that wants to have the conversation now, right, they're able to manage and kind of keep a level head. They're able to be thoughtful, intentional about what they're saying, and the other partner may not have that skill. We don't want to kind of beat them down for not having that skill.
sure.
I want to let the other partner know this is what your partner needs, right? This is what they need. This is a time to kind of regroup and come back, maybe articulate what they want to say, maybe write it down and come back with points so they can come back kind of centered in what the intentional about what they want to say. And sometimes you need a therapist to kind of help just create that, because in the
Yeah,
heat of the experience, no one has the ability to kind of say, this is what we need. So sometimes the couples therapist can help kind of develop that blueprint. When there's conflict, this is what we do.
yeah. Yeah, no, completely. I think that the timeout is one of the most crucial, because especially we see that there's often the anxious and the avoidant in relationship together. That is so common that happens. And so it's often the anxious person who's chasing that resolution, and
Mhm.
the avoidant who maybe needs to take a step back. But the anxious wants to know that the avoidant is coming back. And
Yeah.
that is really important that they know that. When you talk about, though, like maybe somebody doesn't have the skill to regulate, totally agreed. Like, especially if they weren't raised with that, it wasn't role
Hmm.
modeled. Do you believe, though, and do you put the onus on them that while you might not know it, it is your responsibility to learn it? Like, we can only ask your partner for so much patience
Yes.
before.
Yes. And I let them know that part of the responsibility, right, of us being in this relationship is being able to have certain skills, right? So we recognize that you can have it. Again, I go back to, what do you want to do? Do you
Mhm.
find that this is beneficial? Because if the person doesn't find it beneficial, then it's not going to be helpful. So I
Right.
recognize it. I see you. I understand. These are the reasons why, potentially, why you didn't have these skills. If we go into your childhood, what you want to do, how
Right.
can this help you? And I always say, frame it, help you as an individual, and also help you in your relationship. And if there's children involved, and help you modeling this behavior for your children.
Yeah, which is so important to break that intergenerational trauma and dysfunction, and so that they can show up differently for their partner. Like that, I think that is a really important part of it. But yeah, I do think that those skills, whether they stay in the relationship or they choose to leave the relationship, I often say that as well, that like some of these skills you just need to know to function in life effectively, because you're probably, well, you might not be lashing out at other people in the same way you're lashing out at your partner. You're probably not showing up as effectively in other dynamics as you could be if you had these skills.
Absolutely. And I point that out in terms of, how does it affect you at work, and how does it affect you with friends, and different things like that. But sometimes also they may be able to have that skill with friends and at work, right? Because there's kind of like, I'm getting paid to do this. I can't show out, so that awareness is there. When it's
Yeah.
with our intimate partner, we it's so much emotion and feelings involved, that the
Yep.
raw is so raw, that we give
Mhm.
them all of our ugly and all of our nasty.
Yeah. Well, I think that it feels there's so much more of a threat there, that especially knowing that insecure attachment is based, no matter what your insecure attachment style is, it's based in this really intense fear of rejection and abandonment. And so when we're in conflict with our partner, the very person who we crave the most, who we want, we want their acceptance, we want their approval, um, and we are in conflict, our brain is telling us there's this threat of losing them, or there's this threat that they're rejecting us, they don't like us. And I think that that's where we become so reactive, because that's really scary when,
Yes.
you know, when you don't know what's going to happen to this person you love the most.
Right. Also, and this person's supposed to love me, and I'm not feeling love right now, or I'm not feeling heard right now. You're not hearing me. You're not listening to me. Um, why you're not giving me this? Why am I not feeling this? You supposed to. We made a covenant, right? We made a promise.
Yeah.
All of those things. So it's a bit of I wouldn't call it a tantrum, but it's like I'm yeah, I would call it a
Yeah.
tantrum.
Yeah. Look at
Right.
me, see me, tell me you
Right.
care. Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you see the cultural differences come up in the work that you do? So I know a lot of your social media, a lot of advocacy, especially for the Black male. So
Yeah.
that's something that you do a lot of.
Mhm.
Where do you see these cultural differences come up, like when you're doing couples work, and how do you kind of navigate that?
So I would say, so there's two things. One, working with African Americans, and then working with Afro Caribbean. My
Mm,
family's from Jamaica and Aruba, so um, just knowing the culture is so important. And we talk about a lot about in the field cultural competency. That's very
yeah,
important in the work that we do, and being aware of dynamics. Of course, there's no one size fits all, but we understand that culture plays a huge role in terms of people's lives.
hmm,
So with that being said, I'm always going to ask them in terms of in your household, how does things work, right?
sure,
What's the dynamics? Of course, there's some shared experiences, but I always let them know that just because I'm black, I'm a black male, and you're a black male, that we have the same, a complete same experience. But I understand. Also, understanding the nuances and some of the kind of general cultural norms
hmm,
helps in terms of the work that I'm doing. There's no need to explain or go into great detail, because I could kind of speak to it or understand the dynamics, or understand why you may have responded that way because of
sure.
the event or where you were or how you felt. So that really helps in terms of the work that I do, being a black male and working with black couples and Afro Caribbean couples.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you say that though, that just because you are a Black male does not mean that every Black male that sits in front of you, you automatically are going to get their experience. And,
Absolutely.
for whatever culture that is, every white woman that sits across from me, I'm not going to get her experience.
Hmm.
And I think that's an important distinction to make, that this isn't just about like when we are culturally competent, part of that is knowing that we are culturally incompetent, that like we don't know,
Hmm.
like there's not, even if we have a general awareness around a culture, there's
Hmm.
so many nuances that it is our responsibility to ask the client, who is the expert on themselves, what their experience is.
Absolutely right, and that I'm sure, and ensuring that I'm taking that to account in terms of interventions, in terms of how I'm working with them, in terms of the things that I say.
Yeah.
That's so important. But the visibility of Black men in this field is so important, and that's what I use my platform for,
Yeah.
just to one, raise awareness that and that's where Black Kingsley Therapy 2 came from, that I trademark, just encouraging Black men to go seek therapy, because that's doing couples counseling. That's when I recognize that I'm like, this brother needs some therapy himself, like on his own, because years ago when I started, like in 2016, I really started doing private practice. You know, I would see the partner in a heteronormative relationship, the the wife or the girlfriend is like, I'm making the appointment and we are coming. And he comes in and he slouches down. And I'm introducing myself, and it's kind of like, I'm just here. And she is doing the majority of the talking. And then I'll just say, I'm like, hey, man, what's up? Like, tell me why you're here. Man, she dragged me here. I'm like, so I said, so she dragged you here. So so I said, so it's all good, huh? Everything's good. Nah, it's not. And then you see the posture change,
Mm,
because I was asking questions. I
yeah.
explored, I made him feel a part of the conversation,
Right.
asked him his feelings. And then when she interject, I'm like, pause. You you have an
We'll call
opportunity,
you when we're ready.
right, right, and having him have the opportunity to speak, and that helps to build that camaraderie, build that wow, I have that space, and then at the end of the session, it's like, man, this was good. I said, you even want to come here, right? And they'll laugh. Um, but just to have that space to kind of feel heard and understood, and that's why I started Black Kings in Therapy too. I'm like, you Black men need to go to therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to ask where that kind of when
Hmm.
you got more into the advocacy part of that. So it was kind of the
Yes,
private practice work you were doing made you
absolutely.
aware.
Absolutely, just recognizing the need and just seeing in terms of in the world, uh and that time, in terms of shootings that we're seeing, it was nowhere near it is now in terms of Black men being killed. it
Yeah.
I felt that, and now the need is even greater in terms
Right.
of the getting the help. We're seeing a lot more conversation around it, a lot more conferences and things of that nature. So I'm really happy to see that it's actually not just kind of this thing that's just for now. I'm glad that it's going to stick. That is something that people and Black men are finding value in, and not ashamed of saying that. Yeah, I have a therapist.
Right. Right. And you are normalizing it so much. And that's what I love a lot, even about your page and stuff and the stuff you put in your stories that like you vacillate between just like you're just like an everyday guy. Like like you can go hang out with them this weekend, or they could be sitting on your couch across from you, like that
Right.
you are just relatable in that way. And I love that and I respect that because that is when then another Black man might be scrolling through his Instagram feed or the explore page and he's gonna see you not presenting as like a know-it-all or as self-righteous or something like that, just as like a normal dude, and he can connect to that. And I think that's a
Yes.
powerful thing.
Yes, and that was my intention. That is exactly what I wanted to project. Just everyday person that you can actually go to get therapy. And now I'm shifting focus, and that's still important to me. But I also want to show uh, the need for more Black men in the field, and I'm
Mhm.
excited to be teaching social work, to represent as a Black male professor.
Yeah.
I've gotten numerous just talks from students. Just I've never had a Black professor before,
Mm,
and it's like wow, just to be able to introduce that experience,
yeah.
and so students can have a different lens in terms of when they are in social work school, when they're working with different populations,
Yep.
what they to experience. With my knowledge working in addiction, I worked at a drug treatment program for many years. Just bringing that knowledge of working in inner city social service programs and working with diverse populations with the severely mentally ill. Just bringing all of that knowledge, I feel is so important from a different lens to
Yeah.
the to future social workers.
No, for sure. Because, like obviously, the vast majority of those students probably even was your education, like it's the white woman. That
Right.
is the
That's
vast
the field.
majority.
That's the field we go in. Right. That's the
Yeah.
field.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the field that they go in. Right.
So
So
I mean, it's a brave choice even to begin with, to be like, I'm going to break the mold. But then furthermore, for you to be able to then go teach, I mean, that's incredible because those are the perspectives that are needed, like the perspectives that are outside of this box that has been so much the mental health field for so long.
yes.
It's not working anymore. And it probably didn't work then, but we're
Right.
just, there's this opportunity to be able to expand it.
Yes.
So much respect for you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I talk about not only insight and awareness for our clients, is also for providers and clinicians, that we are aware and insight,
Yeah,
have our own insight and aware of our biases or preconceived notions that we have before we provide a service. And that's for
yeah,
everybody, but I talk a
for
lot
sure.
about for my students, like you need to be aware of yourself. You need to be aware of how you're feeling in the moment when you're working with the client, because what the things that you say could impact them, right? If you're dealing with trust issues and you're working with a couple that there was infidelity, how are you going to manage what you experience, not bring that and stay focused on their relationship?
Right. Right. And that especially, I mean, we know we've been in the field for a long time and we still know that triggers can come up and
Yes.
that we are still human as we're sitting there. And so being aware of it. And I think the other piece of that is not denying it.
Not
And
denying.
so not denying, your biases and your prejudiceness and like all of the stuff that you are bringing to the table. We all are looking through life in our own lens. But if you continue to deny it, that I think that's when you are most likely to show up. You're most likely to cause harm
Absolutely.
versus having the
Yeah.
awareness of it.
Being the awareness is absolutely important.
Yeah.
And again, and it translates back to with our clients too, that awareness. We all come with stuff. We all have our stuff, right? So
Yep.
nobody's going to be polished, squeaky clean, right? A nice Tiffany box. But the acknowledgement, the awareness goes a very long way. Owning your stuff.
Agreed.
Nobody can take that away from you once you own it.
Absolutely. All right, Errin, I appreciate your time. We will leave it on that note because that is a good note to leave it on. Tell everyone where they can find you, your website, social media, where can you be found?
So I can be found on Instagram, the Black_therapist, as you can see down below, the Black_therapist. My website for my nonprofit is called modifywellness.org. I'm really excited about that. That's where I do events and conversations around mental health. I'm looking to explore and go around all around the country talking about mental health to anybody that wants to hear me talk.
I love it. That is awesome. Thank you so much, Errin, for being here. I really appreciate you hanging out and for all your insights. So very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Errin, for giving us some ideas on growing together with our partners. And thank you all for hanging out on Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for my newsletter, and find me on Instagram at Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick. This is Relatable Relationships Unfiltered.